Breeding difficult reptiles has been quite the learning experience, and I spent the last year doing my best to produce some of the most beautiful geckos in the world, but some of the harder ones to keep and breed. In doing so, I've learned a lot, and I felt it was important to share with all who plan on breeding anything really, whether it's difficult or easy. But stay tuned to hear some of my biggest takeaways that may spare you some trouble in your attempts. First, here's a little backstory. Breeding reptiles is an incredibly rewarding endeavor, and that applies across the board. Whether you're breeding something easy or not, getting those first eggs, hatching those first babies, and having your own productions breed for the first time are all exciting milestones. I started breeding with the humble crested gecko. Crested geckos are very popular, and this popularity only ever seems to grow, and what makes them so popular is their ease of care and therefore how easy it is to breed them. They're hardy, their offspring tend to do well, and we kind of have the process figured out, and so their ease allows us breeders to focus on other stuff, namely the genetics and appearances of the geckos as opposed to the health and hardiness. Since breeding them can be so simple, it makes sense that we've got space to focus on the more subjective things, but not all reptiles are like this, and that's something that's not just a given. My recent journey into the Uroplatus genus, consisting of the Madagascar Leaf-Tailed Geckos, has been an eye-opener for a few reasons, and the first one is that they're not the easiest to care for, especially in contrast to some of the more popular reptiles that I've kept. They require intricate attention, proper enclosure setups, and getting them to actually breed requires patience and care. And you can't simply throw a male and a female together and assume that they'll breed and produce viable offspring. The reason I chose Uroplatus as a genus is because I wanted a challenge. Having bred crested geckos for several years at that point, and as rewarding as that experience was, I decided I wanted to focus on a species that was difficult to breed and therefore need breeders to focus on producing healthy offspring. Don't get me wrong, crested geckos have been incredible to work with, and I'm not planning on cutting that project anytime soon, but breeding an animal that thousands of breeders already produce isn't easy. Though I knew that breeding Uroplatus wasn't going to be a walk in the park, I definitely had more confidence that it would go well, and in the last few months I've finally successfully produced some beautiful individuals for multiple species now, and I hope that this continues. But without further ado, here are some of the biggest lessons I've taken away from this experience thus far. My first takeaway is that cutting corners will always come back to bite you. Especially when having the experience of easier to breed reptiles, it's easy to assume that you can wing it or cut corners in certain places, and this is almost never the case, especially with reptiles that are difficult to keep and breed. Cutting corners can result in big setbacks, issues, and more. Most times it isn't worth it to cut those corners. Investing the proper time, money, and effort into the animals is very important. The second thing I've learned is that proper environment is so unbelievably crucial, more than you'd think. This sounds obvious, but it's not as obvious as it may initially come across. For example, when breeding easy-to-breed reptiles, not everyone finds it necessary to cycle their reptiles. Cycling is just simply providing a seasonal variation to stimulate breeding behavior. With my crested geckos, for example, my adults readily bred consistently, and I rarely had issues with pairing my animals with egg laying and egg fertility. With Uroplatus, though, it took months of environmental tweaking and maintenance before I saw signs that my pair was even interested in each other. For the longest time, they simply seemed to coexist, and though they never really bothered each other, they never showed interest in each other either. For a while, this left me pretty hopeless, but after getting the environment figured out, I started to receive eggs, I started to see babies hatch, and the pair showed signs of interest in each other. Getting their environment figured out was very important. Once I had the temperature, humidity, and UV light exposure figured out, they began to breed and lay eggs pretty consistently. It's very crucial to do significant research on the species you're considering, and it's also helpful to talk to those with more experience. Some information is simply not available online, and that can only be found through all reliable conversation. The third thing I took away, and probably the largest, is more of a question than a piece of advice or information, and it's something I began to apply outside of just the difficult species I keep and breed. The question goes as follows: if we put so much effort into the difficult reptiles, shouldn't we do better for the easy ones? The Uroplatus may have needed very specific care, and if they didn't receive it, their health would suffer dramatically, and they wouldn't have ever bred for me. On the other hand, crested geckos may breed even in suboptimal conditions, but since they do fine in less ideal conditions, breeders and keepers aren't as encouraged to do as thorough of a job. After noticing how much effort I put into my difficult reptiles, I've made it a goal of mine to work just as hard to provide the same for my others. After all, easy or hard, a reptile is a life, and this was a valuable lesson that I took away. So yes, breeding reptiles is rewarding no matter what the reptile is, but pursuing the reptiles that really need attention and care has been extra special. I sincerely hope that these little bits of information may have shifted your perspective, and I hope they help you out in the future, and I'm really excited to be able to share my experiences with fellow reptile keepers and breeders. If you would like more insider updates, information, and fun reptile community-centric activities, please consider subscribing to the Gecko Gambit newsletter. Every week we have a photo of the week, a featured breeder who we shout out, some cool information, announcements, deals, giveaways, and a lot more. Don't miss out, and it's completely free to sign up to, and the link will be in the description. Additionally, I have multiple books available. The Evolution of Crested Gecko Care is an all-intensive care and breeding guide for crested geckos, complete with a very meticulously organized table of contents so that you can find any information you need with the flip of a page. Additionally, I have a reptile photo book consisting of some of my favorite photographs of some very awesome reptiles I've got here at Gecko Gambit. And finally, we now have a kids book available as well, titled What's a Gecko? All of these are available on Amazon, and if you are interested in some cool merchandise and would like to support us, please feel free to check out the apparel link below. Thank you for watching, and until next time.